At the heart of troubled credit unions is corporate governance issues.
We'd come into the ones that poor corporate governance is why they ended up being in a problem case. And we have a large number of credit unions we worked with that were extremely troubled that are turned around and are still in existence today.
If you Google a definition for corporate governance, you'll get 720,000 results. Poor corporate governance, it often leads to the failure of an organization. Most of them are unpaid, with a few exceptions in the minor states. And by and large, they're very dedicated and they do a very good job of keeping our system safe and sound.
It's greed takes hold in some of these cases, and it can make people do really poor decisions.
NCUA thinks, is there an ethical issue, right? Were these write-offs legitimate write-offs and errors, or did somebody benefit from it? No, you don't need a Community Reinvestment Act because you have the ability through the modest means requirement of the Federal Credit Union Act to do whatever you need regulatory and guidance wise.
The regulation expects them to direct the operations of the credit union in conformity with the law. The act, their bylaws, this regulation, and they have this catch-all phrase in there, sound business practices, which they don't really define anywhere.
The root cause of failure was poor management without adequate risk management practices and controls.
It's important that you have diversity of skills on there and diversity of backgrounds. I had a troubled credit union one time in California, but every director was a retired teacher in their 60s or 70s. You do just need to be aware of that. Diversity amongst your directors is a strength. You can create blind spots in your board if everyone is from that same exact demographic and in backgrounds.
You have those blind spots if you don't have the diversity of thought.
The biggest responsibility of a board is to pick their management team, their CEO, and they need to keep that whole culture in mind and not pick a CEO that's going to dominate and determine that culture.
And I look back to when I was deputy executive director and versus 15, 20 years later when I was the executive director, and just the importance of when you meet people on the elevator and instilling in them the confidence of what's going on. It's easy to lose sight of that as you're busy getting things done, but it really needs to be ever present in the mind of the board, in the mind of the executives, and the mind of the tellers as they're dealing, because it trickles down while they're not at the top.
In really high performing credit unions, you could go talk to the little tellers in the lobby and the loan officers, and they had a pretty good idea exactly what was in that strategic plan and their roles in it. They actually had a policy on these kind of one-off things like this, these new opportunities come up, and it dictated, here's the business case that we're going to make and present to the board when these opportunities come up that we didn't think about in their strategic plan.
The board is responsible for establishing and improving the policies that govern and guide the operations of the covered institution in accordance with its risk profile and as required by law and regulation. Establish a code of ethics. The board should establish a written code of ethics for the covered institution covering directors, management, and employees, and in addressing conflicts of interest, self-dealing, how to report illegal and unethical behavior, and so employees know who it is that they would need to go to.
People that operate outside those bounds of ethics create problems more often than not. An employee just comes in and puts a junk drive on our desk. You might want to see this, and it's appraisals for all these properties that they tell us they don't have.
Provide active oversight of management. The board should hold management accountable for adhering to the strategic plan and approved policies and procedures to ensure the covered institutions compliance with safe and sound banking practices and all applicable laws and regulations.
Directors need to be independent, but they still need to work cooperatively with management.
The structure of your compensation program is something that needs to be done with care.
Compensation is a difficult thing for directors because you want to pay your executives fairly to retain good talent, but you also don't want to get to the point where you're overcompensating them and being overly generous either.
You may see that smaller institutions aren't compensating their staff enough for what actually needs to happen.
Reach out to learn how we assist our clients with NCUA so they save time and money.